Will Sam Levitt be an NFL contributor? Is Austin going to watch the new primetime documentary on Netflix? And who will I invite to my super secret, only I can beat NCAA Dynasty? We'll talk about it right after the stinger. Nace, I am Matt Bruening, and this is why you need to be subscribed to the channel and have that bell icon turned on, because we went live early. Austin and I want to get done. Austin needs to eat. I want to watch some MLS games. I have also not eaten today, so we're going to get this done. We're answering your questions. If you did not notice, I am.
To answer your questions, boom. That's how we should have started off the show.
That was, we're still getting back into it. That's exactly how we should have started out. But we are answering your guys' questions. If you not see the graphic, or if you are not a member of the site, again, it's just so easy to get in, right, Austin? I mean, let's just do it right off the bat. What is it? $2.99 gets you in the door. That's it. Just $2.99. Jump in. You can ask any questions, not just for AMA shows. We're in there all the time. I shouldn't say we're in there all the time. Austin's definitely in there all the time. I make appearances, but we're always answering your guys' questions. Moxley does a really great job of that as well, among others. But we do have a ton of questions from our listeners, viewers, some questions on Twitter. And I want to start with this one, Austin. It's been announced. Netflix next year in 2026 is going to be dropping a primetime documentary about one primetime Deion Sanders himself. 3 episodes, hour long. I know you cannot wait to hate watch all 3 episodes, right?
I'll watch it. And it's funny because I actually like some of the stuff that Deion does from a coaching perspective.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I don't if stylistically him as a coach, I actually don't really hate it. Mm-hmm. What I don't like about him is how flippant he is with the recruiting and how, they'll come to me, and how he really hasn't recruited high school that well. And I think I don't like when anybody coaches players gain a reputation that is undeserved. Mm-hmm. Based on a very specific, probably not repeatable set of circumstances that happened one time. And I think that's kind of what we saw last year with Colorado, where now people think this is going to be a perennially good team, and he's probably a good coach. I'm not sure, but I do think I like a lot of the personal accountability stuff he does. A lot of the, at least from what they say to the public, focusing on education, things like that. I actually do really like some of those things. So I will watch it. I'm interested to see what he's like, but I do think that this is going to be a fairly down year for Colorado. I mean, kind of a reversion back to the normal. So, we'll see if that's included and how that's portrayed and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that part will be very interesting. I mean, I do want to give him credit there. And I don't think we were ever too, I know it was kind of a bit at times, throughout the seasons about us. I don't think we ever really hated that much on Colorado. I mean, again, they did bring him back, 9-4 this past year, right? So, I mean, It's been a long time since people talked that much about Colorado, but I do think some of that stuff was probably a little bit overblown. And I think the fatigue probably for some of us, at least I'll just speak for myself, came from the fact that it was everybody was talking about Colorado as they were this top team in the nation all season long. And it wasn't that great. So I think for me it was more why are we not talking about some of these teams and some of these players that are actually doing some super amazing things? But I do get it. Like I said, I mean, the last time Colorado was relevant, I mean, if Mox was here, he'd be able to tell you exactly the date.
They were good 4 years ago.
Was it really 4 years ago? I think I said it was a decade, and then Mox
5 years ago. They had one random year in there where they were good. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. I mean, obviously, Caden Salter. There's talks about what's the true freshman's name? Julian Lewis maybe having to play a little bit. So it'll be fun to see. Hey, we got Luke Probasco in the chat, longtime listener. Just wanted to
That's
say
our
hi.
First listener.
Luke. He is our first listener, yeah. If you got any questions, Luke, hit us with anything you want. Anything outside of the teacher stuff. We're not going to talk about that again. That was I know that's Luke's favorite thing, though. The one thing we've deleted. The one thing we've ever deleted and edited. That's, I think, the only thing we've ever done. All right, Austin, we've got some other questions here. I'm going to do all the Twitter ones first before we jump into the Discord. So Santi asks, what does Zachariah Branch need to prove or do at Georgia to return to his post-freshman status as a top 10 Devy wide receiver?
It's funny because I don't even know that he needs to have 1,000-yard year. I think if he can, if he can show that he can consistently, or at least with some consistency, win deep, so that he's not just that short area yak guy. Because that's what makes some of these guys unique once they get to the NFL. If you're just an underneath kind of jitterbuggy guy, that there's a very specific role for you, but you're not commanding a huge payday. You're not the centerpiece of an offense. And likewise, if you're just a guy that wins deep. So if he can show that he can do both of those things at somewhat of a consistent level, yeah, I think the NFL will like him because the athleticism stuff is still there. I think he's a pretty dangerous returner. We saw that with him as a freshman. We saw less of it last year. So I think that is like literally the thing that he has to do. If he can just be a somewhat consistent deep threat there, I think that answers at least a lot of the questions that I have, because I don't expect him to be, this guy that's working the intermediate stuff and this amazing route runner. Like, he doesn't have to be with how dynamic he is. He doesn't have to do that kind of stuff to still be a really, really fantasy. Like, I think if he can show that he wins deep, he could be a Hollywood Brownish type of prospect and player in the NFL. And that's a pretty good outcome. And a guy that had a lot of really good years. And, before kind of getting banged out the past couple of years, we might still be talking about him as a really nice dynasty piece. That's kind of what Branch could be, I think.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. And I think the NFL is going to fall in love with him anyway because of just his athleticism. Like, we see every year there's a couple of those guys when they go into the combine, right, and they just absolutely blow it up that they fall in love with. I think Branch probably does that.
Arian Smith just went in the 4th round, Matthew. Arian Smith just went in the 4th round. He literally doesn't have hands.
Yeah, so, I know. Which Branch, I will say, at least is a much better receiver. So, yeah, I definitely – if anybody sits there and says, I know this is not what you just said, like he has to have over 1,000 yards, like I just don't think that happens. We talk about this all the time. When's the last time Georgia even had like a 900-yard receiver? I don't know that and I definitely don't think they get that with Gunnar Stockton, the quarterback this year. But I think overall, as long as he goes in there and shows himself well, I don't even know that he has to necessarily lead the room. I think if he gets 600, 700 yards receiving, maybe shows a little bit on special teams, I think that he's going to end up still being probably I would say now, even though I am much lower on him than I know you and Colin are, and I think Chris kind of sits with me on that stage as well, and I know Felix did when we talked about it, I still think he's probably locked into a pretty high day 2 pick. I just don't see him falling out of that range again, just because of how special he is athletically. Luke asks in the chat, who is the G5 representative in the playoffs in 2025? That's a good question. I don't know that I have anyone that jumps to mind. I don't think Boise State does it again.
I do. I'm going chalk. So
that's who you're going to go, Boise State?
There was a couple players, but
Tulane. I think Tulane does it. They were fairly close last year, weren't they?
They came on hot at the end of the year, right? Tulane did. Like, it was like as the week started wearing down, you were like, oh, there's actually some scenarios where Tulane could sneak in here. I think that was what unfolded for them.
That's probably who I'd go with. I can't think of anybody else. Like the Mountain West, it's probably Boise State. Who else was good last year in the Mountain West? Who'd they play in the championship game? Because didn't they have a chance to get in? They were in the discussion. Was it UNLV? Was that?
Yeah, it was.
And where did oh gosh, they just got the new coach and everybody's all excited about Dan Mullen, right? He just left.
That's UNLV, right?
Is it UNLV? Maybe UNLV.
Yeah, because what's his name left?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Well, you think Colorado State, Luke? Interesting. I don't know about that. Was Colorado State? I honestly can't remember. If Colorado
I don't
State
think you can make the playoff with Braden Fowler Nicolosi as your. I just think that's prohibitive at some point, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd probably go if I'm not going chalk UNLV. I'll say Tulane or UNLV. Although I'd love to see one of the services get in. Army was close, so there's a lot of talk. Army and Navy getting in.
I would hate that.
I don't know.
I support the troops or whatever, but that's not why I'm saying that.
Right there with Chris Moxley, he's just an un-American host. Where's Mox when you need him?
They just get bullied on the lines as soon as they face a legitimately talented team. And that's just like one of those things, you put them in the playoff and they lose by 30.
Yeah.
Like pretty easily. So
I mean, didn't Tennessee almost lose by 30? But
yeah. So put Navy in that situation and
don't
see.
They also get bullied? I'm just saying.
How bad would that have been? Would Ohio State have emptied the bench against Navy?
I think so.
Like,
we would have seen Lincoln Kindholz in there throwing plays to throwing deep passes to Mylan Graham. Mylan Graham might have broken a year 1-0
if we got Navy in the playoff.
Navy had made it in. So
I think the service academies are fun to watch during the season, but I never ever root for them to get to the playoff like that, because I just think it makes for non-interesting matchups.
I will say, if the G5 listens to me and ends up making their own playoff format, I'd love to see the services get in there, because I actually think that would be a very intriguing thing, because some of those G5 teams struggle to stop them.
They wouldn't opt out.
They would not. Shane is in the chat. What's up, Shane? If you got any questions, hit us with it. And Luke agrees.
You can't ask us anything about Clemson. You cannot ask us anything about Clemson.
Yeah, that's
Shane.
the one thing.
Sorry.
You can ask us anything you want about Ohio State. Luke does agree with Austin that Boise State, he believes, will be the representative. This was asked to me. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, Boise loses Genty and Andrew Simpson, and a couple other like fringy type pieces, but they bring back a large percentage of that team, and I think they've got adequate running back replacements, so they'll be fine.
Yeah. So I answered this on Twitter, but I would like to hear your discussions. I've got to assume that this is like I don't want to say Devy depleted, but like this can't be a startup draft, that he's discussing taking Sam Levitt at the 110 in his Devy league. It is super flex. But he said that he sees I have Sam Levitt at my number 5 in my rankings. Austin, though, what do you think about him? Do you see him as a legit contributor at the next level? He does, again, have the opportunity to take him at the 1.10. I was looking at our Devy rankings. I feel like that's really high. I looked at easily like 6 to 8 wide receivers I'd take over him, a couple running backs. And I mean, I have him at 5 in my C2C rankings because I believe in the Devy upside, but I take all 5 quarterbacks I have ranked ahead of him as well. So I'd see him more as like maybe 20 to the 24 range as a player I would pick probably in a Devy draft. Again, I don't know if this is a startup or not, but I obviously love Levitt. I've been a big fan for a while.
The kind of thing that I think elevates Levitt at least in my experience in a pure Devy league, is that I think you're less like in C2C. I often say, like, I'm probably not really drafting a lot of draft eligible quarterbacks coming up unless they're just pretty surefire. I was drafting Caleb Williams and Drake May.
Yeah.
But I'm not really last year, I wasn't drafting, I don't know who were the top QBs coming off the board last year. I wasn't drafting Shador early. I wasn't drafting, I just wasn't doing that because they weren't kind of those sure things. And I think if you're taking, again, in my experience in pure Devy drafts, taking the freshmen and saying, I'm just going to hold them, the value once they become the starter increases, and then you move them. I find that to be less of a thing in Devy because you're not getting fantasy points out of them. Like, they don't hold that value necessarily like they do in a CFF or in a C2C league. So that does kind of rule out, like, I think in a pure Devy league, I would be tempted to take Sam Levitt over Bryce Underwood or for sure over Keelan Russell. I'd be very tempted to do that. But I wouldn't be necessarily jazzed about the prospect of taking any of those quarterbacks early in a Devy league. But I think a lot of Devy stuff is really league specific, and if your league tends to hit quarterback really hard, then I'd probably take Sam Levitt there. If they tend to not really trade a lot for some of these quarterbacks, then maybe I wouldn't be super interested in snagging a guy like him there. But I like him. I've got him top 6, 7 at quarterback. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. I've got 3 day 1 QBs right now in 2026. He's one of them. So, I wouldn't hate it. I'm mulling over a trade in a league right now, actually a C2C league, where the main pieces are I'm sending Nate Frazier for Levitt in some sort of capacity with some small add-ons on either side. So I like him. I'm actively acquiring him if it's not too expensive.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been a fan of his for a while. You're really going to not like who this quarterback, that the top of the quarterback ADP here is, which I'll mention here in a minute, according to our ADP history. But That's fair about Bryce Underwood. I really wasn't thinking about that. I obviously have Bryce Underwood ranked ahead of him in C2C rankings. I do not have Keelan Russell ahead of him. So I do kind of agree with that. I'd be willing to take him a little bit higher just because of that. But yeah, I mean, I'm to answer the question fully, though, I do think he's got a chance to be a contributor. I said on Twitter, I think, with he's got enough athleticism. He didn't show a lot of it last year. I thought, again, for his real first year starting, he was very good, especially toward the end of the year as he really started to get to know the offense. He was really good in big moments as well for Arizona State. Was really good at the back half of that Texas game. I think give him another year in that system with Jordan Tyson hopefully healthy. A lot of the other weapons they've added around him, I think he's got a chance to be a back-end quarterback too. I think he's a very good quarterback. And again, he's a guy, I mean, we liked him. I mean, we were much higher on him than the services from the very beginning. Our entire team liked him. I know I get a lot of love in the Discord and on Twitter for liking him, but that was just because I said he was going to have a good year last year. Our whole recruiting team loved him, though. It was not me. I mean, that was, I think, the last year David really helped do writing and grading for the guide as well. I mean, David was high on him. Matt was high on him. You were high on him. Alfred, myself, like we all loved the kid. So it's always fun to see those guys succeed as well. As we're high on him. Do you want to guess who the highest taken quarterback was? Maybe I should take CFF out of here. Maybe that'll change it a little bit.
Probably will.
It did.
I mean,
not
I'm
much.
I'm assuming it's either Arch or Lagway.
Maybe I'm doing this wrong, but it is not. It was I've got to be doing this wrong. ADP is Caden Salter.
No, you're looking at it wrong. You're filtering it wrong.
Okay. You're probably right. I've filtered to 2024.
You're in the ADP history?
Yeah.
Well, don't do that. Go to the actual ADP.
Ah, okay. You do that then, and you can tell me who the quarterback is.
I am.
Okay.
It's Arch, then DJ, okay. Then Bryce Hunter.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I wasn't looking at this year. I was talking about, I guess we should be looking at this year. You mentioned last year you couldn't remember who the quarterbacks were that were going off the board. So I was trying to look at who the quarterbacks were going off last year to kind of figure out if you would have taken any of those players. We do, Luke. I mean, look, let's be honest here, Luke. I know a lot of people give Felix. I'm not much better with the technology stuff than Felix is. Like I'm slightly better. I'm lucky that Felix is as bad at it, so that I don't get hanged on as much as I do, or as much as I mess that up.
What were you looking at?
I don't know. I typed in 2024, and then I typed in quarterback position. Caden Salter was the top one that pulled up.
Oh, that is not the case for me.
Okay, well, that was. I mean, I could show you my screen if you'd like. I'm not
afraid. It's showing Quinn and Drew Aller for me.
Maybe I did something wrong.
User error.
Here, let's go. We'll take CFF and C2C off here. Devi. I'm going to deselect all things. I love how we're just doing this live on the podcast. Position, quarterback. I'm telling you, it pulls up Caden Salter for me as ADP 2, standard Devi 1. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but.
What month are you looking at?
I have it through all of them. Every month.
I just selected a specific month. I wonder if that, I just picked June. I wonder if that's giving you a weird.
That probably is because I've got every month and it's pulling that up. But anyways, we'll answer a couple more of these in the chat here. Let's see. Where to go? Daniel asks, Sire Gaines or Jam Dunbar better back at Boise State? They obviously are now talking about the fact that Malik Sherrod also transferred in. But your thoughts on that backfield, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, so I liked Malik Sherrod at Fresno.
Yeah, Fresno.
I don't think that he's as good as Gaines or Dubar, but between like returning from injuries I have a feeling that backfield kind of turns into hot hand a little bit at times, but we'll see. I think for CFF this year, I wouldn't draft any of them. Like I just straight up wouldn't touch that backfield. I'm fine with missing out on whatever happens there.
Give a shout out to Luke. Him and Justice do the G5 Hive podcast. Definitely check it out. It's one of the better shows about college football. They cover so much stuff, and he mentions here in the chat the Worker Bee series they've got going on right now. Going to drop some good insight on that room, so definitely check that out if you want more answers to that question. Shane asks about the Ohio State wide receiver room after Tate and Smith. Who do we like for Ohio State? I guess it's probably going to be Brandon Inniss. He'll be the 3. I don't want anybody else outside those 2. I don't think they're going to pass enough for it to matter, if you want me to be honest. But that's also maybe I'm letting
don't listen to the Mylan Graham truthers. Don't listen to the Mylan Graham truthers. You're
Look,
1-0.
He actually has
been
getting
profile that
he's been getting a lot of love, but no, I'm not telling you to go draft him. We're not doing Brandon Inniss all over again, Colin Decker, if you're listening to this. But no, I just look, like I said, maybe I'm letting my I don't want to say hate. I do not think Julian Sain is the next coming of Trevor Lawrence, as everybody else at Ohio State seems to think he is going to be. I just don't see how anybody else produces outside of Tate Smith. And I actually think that Max Clare might be the one who gets more work than Brandon Inniss.
Would it shock me if Clare ends up being the wide receiver 3 there nominally? That wouldn't surprise me at all. So
yeah. Martin asked in the chat, does Sam Levitt comp to Bo Nix? I don't think so. I think Bo Nix was more athletic than Sam Levitt was. I think Sam Levitt's got a much better arm than Bo Nix.
Do you know what their ball velocity numbers are?
I don't. I'm just going off that. Sam's my guy. I got to defend him. A bubble screen Bo over here. I don't know what it is.
We have Bo Nix with a 58 mile per
hour. It's
hour.
definitely not 50. I think Sam Levitt's like 56, 57, if
56.
I remember correctly. Okay.
But I've comped Levitt. He's a little more of a gamer. I think he does fall in like the Baker Mayfield bucket, in my opinion, where plays like, I don't know. Bo Nix to me is still not amazing when the play breaks down. You see him do some really bizarre stuff.
Yeah.
When read 1, read 2 aren't there or he doesn't have a ton of time. Whereas I think Sam Levitt is is better in those kind of situations. So a la, kind of throw him in that Baker bucket. But I mean, are Baker and Bo Nix that, dissimilar out of, not really, outside of the fact that, I think Baker's a little better outside of structure than Bo Nix, which is why people like Bo Nix to Denver and basically nowhere else.
I think Baker's just a better overall quarterback, like even in the pocket and everything. I think Bo Nix is very schemed heavy quarterback.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I loved Baker coming out. I thought he was the best quarterback in that class. Obviously, that has not quite worked out, although that's not necessarily his fault. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson just turned out to be amazing. But I loved Baker that year. I thought he was awesome, and I thought the Browns screwed him when he left the Browns. I really wanted Pittsburgh to go get him. It sounds like they made no effort, and now, look at us. So I like watching him. I like seeing that he's been succeeding because I hate Cleveland and I like that they dropped the ball.
Right there with you. So. Hate the Browns as well. We talked about this on that show. I said keep Baker Mayfield, not trade for Aaron Rodgers on one show. I loved Baker Mayfield. He was outside of the flag planting at the shoe, which I did hate him for a little bit of time. He was my quarterback one coming out of that class. I don't disagree. The Browns did him extremely dirty, and they're paying for it, and I'm happy. It makes me smile every day to see them having to deal with the sex pest Deshaun Watson himself and all the wonderful stuff that's going on there. We're going to, at some point in time this year, start either Dylan Gabriel or Shador Sanders. It's going to be fun. Super proud of the Cleveland Browns and everything that they did to get rid of a guy like Baker Mayfield.
Man, I would absolutely hate if the NFL team that I rooted for had all these bozos who all of a sudden overnight became Colorado content creators and are now Cleveland Browns content creators hanging around. I would freaking hate that. I still see them talking about him all the time.
Don't pay attention to X, so it doesn't bother me one bit. I've got look, I got Manchester United. We're horrible there too. So it's everything in my life's falling apart except for Ohio State won a national championship last year. That's all I care about. Anyways, speaking of Shador Sanders, Pollywall asked Shador Sanders, just kidding. What are the traits you look for to separate CFF producers from NFL talent at quarterback, running back, and he said tight end? I'm surprised he went tight end and not wide receiver there. But Austin, what are the traits you look for to separate CFF producers compared to NFL talent?
I mean, I think the obvious one is school. I know that's not a physical tool, but that honestly does play a big part. I'm probably not really much of a advocate, like a serious advocate for players that are outside the P4. And I think that's just been played out so much that I think that's just kind of the route you have to go. Obviously you get a guy here or there, but that's probably the first thing. I mean, I think our star rating does a really good job, not to like pump the star rating. And actually, while we're doing that, I mean, we have got a whole new facelift coming to that star athleticism tool.
It's beautiful.
Tomorrow or the day after or something. It's freaking sick. Been playing around with it a ton. But like it makes it so easy now. Like I can go in and sort all these guys by like ball velocity. We know that we want probably at least 53 miles per hour and probably higher than 55 miles per hour on that for quarterbacks. We know that you basically just straight up want a star index over 70th percentile. So like right off the bat, I can basically just rule out a ton of guys. And obviously you have to watch them and see if there's some wiggle room there for guys that aren't necessarily hitting some of those thresholds. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where I start. And I go from there. I know you're a little more of a small running back guy. I'm a little more of a
big running back guy.
Preference for the beefier boys. But then for wide receiver, I'm a big sucker for like the 6', 185 guy that can play all across the formation, win short, intermediate, deep. Like I'm going to be drawn to that immediately. It's why I was real high on like Chris Olave after his freshman year, because he could do that. What other guys have I really, really liked over the past couple of years that I was just like, he's got the kind of this versatility to him. I mean, that's just the wide receiver. Like I've been really high on Antonio Williams since day one. Like he's a guy that like I've been drawn to, and maybe, he's good, maybe he's not, but like those are the kind of players that I end up kind of gravitating to at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, quarterback has changed a lot for me. I remember kind of when we first started this, although it ended up working out with me on the Ty Simpson thing, I was really against those guys who were just like straight rushers. Like, I was like, you need to be able to pass the ball. I feel like we that still has been proven right, but we've kind of seen, and the star rating, like you said, has really kind of helped separate some of that out for us as well. But you've really kind of seen these guys really develop that off-platform. The easiest way to put it is like what Patrick Mahomes, though Matt Stafford and Aaron Rodgers were doing it before Patrick Mahomes, maybe not to the level Mahomes was doing it at, but really I look for like high ball velo. And my main thing that I look for is guys who can just like seem to thrive in the pocket and actually like run a system instead of just like first read, get the ball out. Like I think when you can see that in some of these guys at the high school level, it definitely seems to translate into college football. And I really try to look for those guys who are not just pure runners. Because I think like, yeah, cool. Like one of the guys I'm still very curious to see how he ends up doing this year. I know Felix was, talking a lot about how he thought he progressed as a passer, but like I still want to see more of it. It's like a guy like Avery Johnson. Sure, really great at the college football. It might end up being like a really fun and great college football player, but does he really have the passing chops and accuracy to make it into the NFL is something I'll be watching for. Running backs, like, and it goes all the way back to, for me, the same thing we talked about. We used to do a draft series back when this used to be the Debbie debate. We would get on Fridays and the three of us would record. Vision is still a big thing for me. I've really started to look for those guys that have that really nice micro movement. And then receiving work as well, because the NFL just really seems to be turning into, especially with the running backs, like a space and pace kind of game where they're trying to get those guys in space, like Jahmyr Gibbs. We've seen it a lot with some of those other running backs as well. Wide receiver, I just try to look for guys who I think are really good route runners, and some of them are really good athletes. I don't have a preference on size there. Really quick, a couple more of the Twitter ones. I see a bunch coming into the chat, so we'll ask those. Fantasy Fraud asks, how does the Texas wide receiver room shake out? Who are the odd men out? And then your biggest C2C sell this offseason and why?
You first.
Texas wide receiver room, I really think it's going to end up probably being Ryan Wingo and I think Emmett Mosley probably. I think he just brings a little bit of different dynamic in there. I mean, Wingo was just so good last year. If you really want to buy into the fact that, he got the LASIK to improve the eyes there, if that really held him back in any way, I think there's like no way to think that there's nothing but up here for him. So that is the players I think probably lead the room. I mean, I think you could make an argument for DeAndre Moore because he really did seem to have like really good chemistry with Arch Manning. He was the guy that Arch seemed to just go to all the time in big games. So, but I think Mosley and Wingo are probably the top two there. My biggest, give me your breakdown on the room, and then because I'm not really sure who my biggest sell would be. I got to look at my rankings really quick.
I think DeAndre Moore is the wide receiver one there.
Okay. I don't hate it.
So I think Wingo is a hyper-specific type of player who needs to play a very specific type of role that doesn't, I think, lend itself without just massive volume. Like, just it doesn't lend itself, in my opinion, to like leading an actual wide receiver room. I think they'll use him on some gadgety stuff. I do think he'll get his touches, but I just don't know that he's well-rounded enough to be a true factor in a room that's going to kind of need some guys to do that. Like, yeah, he's big and fast, but like I just don't think he's much of a actual receiver. So that's where I comment on Wingo. And, you know, I've watched a pretty good amount of Emmett Mosley. Like, I haven't sat down with metaphorical pen and paper and taken a ton of notes on him.
Yeah.
I just think he's a low ADOT, like slot kind of safety blanket kind of guy. And I really didn't see anything else from him last year. I don't know that he's a good enough athlete to be much more than that. I know, like, is he better today than DeAndre Moore is? I don't know. And I think I always give the upper hand to guys that have been in a system for longer if the talent is close. That's most of the discussions, the debates that you and I have gotten into on this show over the years. It's been like you favored a guy that like was coming in because you thought he was a little more talented. And I was like, he might be, but I just think that extra year there, extra 2 years there matters a lot. I think that matters a lot for a guy like DeAndre Moore. I think he leads that room. I don't know what the ADP looks like from like a CFF perspective on that. So, I mean, you know, if we're going to talk strategic, whatever beyond that, you know, maybe if Moore's going way earlier than the other guys, and I'm happy to take one of the other two, whichever ends up being cheaper, but that's not my impression of how that's going. So DeAndre Moore for me.
I don't hate it. I mean, I know I was a big fan of DeAndre Moore. I hated that he hit the year 1-0, but I do think he could be one of those players who ends up kind of breaking that. I'll be curious to see what Texas just looks like in general. I know we talked about this with Chris recently. Like, they're probably in the discussion for the number one team in the nation, but like I was going back and watching some of Arch Manning's games the other day. I wasn't honestly really impressed. And I know stats-wise he was good in that Mississippi State game. I was at that game. It was not that impressive in person. I've gone back and watched some of it, and some of his plays, like he's hitting wide open wide receivers. But like you go back and watch some of his games, I think he really only had the two. It was like, what was it, Louisiana Monroe, and I think Mississippi State were the two he started when Quinn was out. I just don't think either one of them was super impressive. I'm curious to see what he looks like. I wonder if maybe we're getting a little too out ahead of our skis on what Arch and Texas could be, just because we expected more from Quinn and this offense. And so I think everybody just expects this is going to be a much better team because Arch is taking over.
It's going to be an interesting offense. I do think they're going to skew a little more RPO heavy type stuff this year, which I think is going to open up a lot of stuff in that offense, because they tried to run it a little bit with Quinn, but you pretty much always knew that Quinn was handing it off. So, you know, it kind of takes away a lot of the efficacy of what the RPO is at its core. If you know the quarterback can't actually run, I think Arch does give them that dynamic. So I think you're going to see a lot more of like the 8 to 10 yard pass over the middle of the field be open this year, because teams actually are going to have to respect Arch with their linebackers. Yeah. And, you know, just all like instantly kind of dropping those guys because they know it's not coming or whatever. Like I think that's kind of what you're going to see a little bit. So.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely will. I mean, that was the one thing I was going to bring up with Arch, too, is like the bad part is, as much as I think Steve Sarkisian is such an incredible offensive mind, every time they brought Arch in for the most part, it was to run. And like, I
Yeah.
felt like defenses knew it at that point. They were not fooling anybody. So my biggest off-season sell actually kind of goes in with this question from Daniel. I think it's Garrett Nussmeier for me. I like the player, but I think if you were looking at, typically, quarterbacks hold a certain amount of value in C2C leagues, and Garrett Nussmeier was good last year. Especially in the beginning part of the season. I think a lot of people look at that LSU offense and say, okay, could he put up really good stats, be good for you on the college side, and get drafted in the first round? I'm looking at this wide receiver room, and I don't like it at all. I would not be surprised if Garrett Nussmeier doesn't necessarily improve or remains the same player, which I don't think is good enough to get drafted in the first round or honestly even in the second. And right now, I was looking at our rankings in our C2C rankings. He currently comes in as QB6. Now, I mean, I have him in my rankings ranked as QB7, so it's not like I'm really far off from everybody else at the group, or just you, me, Colin, and PJ. But I could, if I'm looking at those top quarterbacks, like he's the one I think could legitimately fall, not even out of round 1, but possibly day 2. And you're spending a high pick on him likely in startup drafts, and a guy who's got a lot of value. He would be the guy that I would sell because I think he's got a lot of value now that could realistically go away very quickly.
I mean, that's true with like all quarterbacks, right? That's why,
Sure,
I draft 0 quarterback. I like Sam Levitt, but if I have to take him in a pure C2C draft, top 20, I don't know that I love that. I don't like Sellers top 6, even though we love Sellers. That's why you buy these guys. Like, it's easy to say, but these are all players that we've been literally like Nussmeier, Sellers, Levitt. Like all these guys were saying, like, you should be drafting these guys as freshmen, or like, even before last year, like the cost was not this, and now it is. So, and that's why we say, draft some of these freshmen because they'll sit there for a little bit and kind of hold their value. So that, Lagway was like a late first, early second last year. Like now he's kind of the 101 off the board. Like there's just a certain time to draft a lot of these. Damon Williams, the time to draft Damon Williams is gone.
Yeah,
the time, that it's just
he's another one we talked a lot about drafting him when he was a freshman.
Yeah. So like that, the time just to draft a lot of those kind of guys is gone. So I don't necessarily disagree, even though I think that a lot of the context around LSU has been ignored at times, where just the nature of what that offense could and couldn't do basically allowed teams to drop 8, and he just had to rip it into crappy windows and or dink and dunk his way down the field. So, I mean, I actually think he's going to go first round. I actually think of all the quarterbacks next year, him and Sellers are like the 2 that I feel like are the lockiest to go day 1. Now, will he be good in the NFL? That's a different question. But
do you have a sell, or you want to move on to a different question?
Do I have what's my biggest sell?
Yeah, biggest offseason sell.
How about CJ Baxter, if you can still sell him?
I thought about him, but I don't know that everybody – I feel like we've kind of – I don't want to say crapped on, but we've all kind of taken a pretty big step back on him. I wonder how people value him now.
If I had to choose between Waymon Jordan or CJ Baxter, I would take Waymon Jordan. Like, sure. It's hit that point. I would rather have Gideon Davidson than him. Like there's some of the freshmen I'd rather have than him. He was terrible as a freshman, blew out his knee as a sophomore, and is in a crowded room as a junior. Like, what's the value proposition here? And people still really like him. I don't get it.
I'm with you. This is an interesting question. I don't know that at least I'm the right person to ask this, because I know Chris does this stuff, and Nick I'd be very curious because I know he does factor this in, but how much weight can you put into a program's production over the last couple of years when making preseason projections for new fits, whether it's freshmen or transfers? Both Julian Sain and Nico are first-year starters, but will they match or surpass last year's production? You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do our projections. I don't pretend to know anything about projections. So just going to get that off my chest before we start this discussion and try to put those disclaimers in when I need to. I mean, the answer is you can't, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what makes it more difficult. I think if I were projecting the UCLA offense this year, I would start by looking at what Indiana did last year. I'd scrape off 15% of the QB production right off the bat because I think it's a tougher situation with worse skill guys around what Nico's going to have. But I will say, like, and I think was it Balling with My Bestie recently? They were talking about this. I want to say it was that show because I don't listen to a lot of stuff that's not our network. That's kind of CFF C2C Devi related. But like, Rourke was actually not that amazing on a per game basis last year.
Yeah, Curtis Rourke. Yeah, he finished just like QB 60, I think, in fantasy. He was not
per game he wasn't great because they were just beating the brakes off of people. So like that's why I'm saying like I would probably only take like 15% off of what he did last year and then kind of adjust the projections from there. And I'm saying Indiana because their UCLA's OC was at Indiana last year, and I would expect to see a lot of similar concepts and pace of play and all those kinds of things. So I mean that's kind of what you have to do. Like you're kind of piecing together a bunch of different stuff and seeing where it works out. So, all
right, I left this on the screen. I meant to ask this for Daniel's question, and I'm gonna get some of the Discord, and then we'll jump in. I've got a bunch of these comments starred that we'll get to. How do you see the LSU wide receiver room with Nick Anderson, Aaron Anderson, Barian Brown, Hilton, and Trey Dez? Do you see one shining above the rest? I would lean Aaron Anderson just based on what we were talking about earlier, being in the room for the past couple of years, knowing the offense. Doesn't sound like Barian Brown's had a very good spring, got a little bit better toward the end. Don't really like Nick Anderson. But your thoughts here.
This is another one that I probably can't really answer because I don't know. Like I need to know what the ADP is of these guys before I would give like a real answer. I guess my inclination is probably Aaron Anderson, but I don't feel that great about saying that. And again, this would probably be a very big cost proposition for me. I will say I would not draft Chris Hilton, even if my life depended on it. I would say just shoot me. He's just not good and he can't stay healthy. And he fills a very specific role that's not really going to ever be fantasy relevant outside of a game where he can catch two big ones. And I actually don't really like Trey Dez for fantasy this year either. Mm-hmm. And part of it's because I just think there's too many other mouths to feed there. But they also brought in Bauer Sharp from Oklahoma. And like, I don't think the Bauer Sharp is some special talent. But I think he's probably today a better football player than Trey Dez Green is. Like, what's the thing we like about Trey Dez Green is just the fact that he might be the best athlete in college football right now. He's probably top 10. I mean, if you put together a list of all positions, he's probably a top 10 athlete in college. That's what you like about him. But I think Bauer Sharp in key situations on key drives, I think we see more Sharp than Green. So Trey Dez is almost more of a luxury player at this point. So I actually really don't like Trey Dez Green this year. From a production standpoint, obviously the tools are going to be very intriguing moving forward and will continue to be intriguing. And the NFL will probably be intrigued by them and less intrigued by Bauer Sharp. But, that doesn't always score you fantasy points. So just a thought.
Yeah. All right. Let Rising Shine in Discord said, now that the dust is somewhat settled from the spring transfer window, which true freshmen are poised to make fantasy impacts and which ones are traps?
0 freshmen should be counted on to make fantasy impact. If you're looking at your roster and you're counting on a freshman touching your lineup this year, you have already failed building your roster for this year, and you need to be able to make some moves. I would just say that right off the bat. I think there obviously are always a handful of freshmen, and some of them really come out of nowhere every year that will produce as freshmen. But like again, that cannot be your mindset. And you have to assume every freshman and every 50-50-ish type of guy will fall flat this year when you're building a C2C roster. You just have to, because otherwise you're going to end up with no depth unless you have unlimited waivers. But I mean, if I had to like pick some guys, like just, F it, like let's just pick a few people. I do think that if Adam Randall goes down, Gideon Davidson could be pretty good there for Clemson. I still don't know that he would be the RB1. I think it would probably be more of a committee, but I think he's a guy that I would be thinking about there. I would have said Anthony League, that running back at Cal, but then they went in and kind of got some not great running backs out of the portal, like bodies. But I also think Anthony League is just kind of okay. So, there's that. And then I know people are talking about like Dallas Wilson. I don't think he's impactful from a fantasy perspective this year. DeCorian Moore could be. He's like the one guy that I really like feel okay about, being a starter and probably being productive. But those are just like, what will a guy come out of nowhere? Probably.
Yeah.
But, like I've had people ask me about Malik Clark at South Carolina. Love him. Could be a starter. Fantasy relevant? Probably not. Same for Malik Washington. Probably starts at Maryland. Fantasy relevant on like a projectable weekly basis? Probably not. I think he's a little overrated as a runner. So, I think it's just, there's not going to be a lot of guys this year. There's just not.
Yeah, the fantasy relevant ones that popped in my mind were definitely DeCorian Moore. I think Lutzer Brooks, which I know you've talked a lot about, going to Alabama, could be a guy who maybe
like fantasy relevant. Like to me, that's like a guy that I would sit here today and say I would probably feel comfortable like plugging him into a starting lineup at least once
flex.
this
year. I could see Brooks maybe being a flex starter. I mean, I think Ty Simpson sucks, so probably not. But we'll see. I agree with you. Like, if you're just looking fantasy relevant, like, I don't think Malik Washington will be fantasy relevant. I do think he plays. There is one, but I don't remember if I'm missing somebody from the transfer portal, which I know we were high on him. Like, could Jace Clarizio lead Michigan State running the ball?
I was looking, and I actually need to double check and see if he was even enrolled early, because I didn't hear anything about him. Through spring, and I didn't do like a huge deep dive on Michigan State yet, but I hadn't really seen anything, which leads me to believe he probably not. Enrollee. But they didn't really do a lot in the portal with that. So
yeah, that's what I thought, because like their running back room is not impressive at all, and I think he's a guy that like we really liked, a little bit different than the services. So it could be a guy that I think maybe could surprise. I think they will be looking to kind of like maybe not have Aiden Childs throw the ball as much as he had to, at least until he can prove he's not going to be as turnover prone. So I wonder if Jace could be one of those guys. Norwich asks, where'd it go? Oh, it just got updated. What is the percentage chance that I start a new NCAA Dynasty League with the new game comes out? And if so, will any users from this year's Dynasty be blacklisted? I probably won't start one. I probably will not get the game.
What?
But if I did, everybody would be blacklisted but Austin, because I know I can beat Austin. I think he beat me both times we played each other.
Yeah, I beat you both times.
It was bull. It was, you know what? We're not going to get into it. No, I don't know. I just don't have that much time, man. Like, I know people thought I was kidding. I really am not. I just don't have that much time to play video. I barely have time to scout some of the players for the official that we do, and I'm required to do that. Austin yells at me if I don't do that. So maybe I'll get it. And it's hard for me to say I won't get it because I do love playing the game, but we shall see. I am in a C2C round 5 supplemental draft. The tight end landscape is a disaster for CFF and Devi in this draft. Any off the wall recommendations you like, or favorite late round tight end for fantasy? I don't.
None.
Yeah,
tight end's a position where I maybe draft one guy a year and one freshman a year, and then if it doesn't look good by week 2, I pick up a guy on waivers, and that's just kind of what you got to do. So, No, I don't have a favorite late guy. And I think it's just really early in the offseason to say that, like for tight end specifically. Like, what news would we have gotten in spring that would? Not a lot for tight end specifically. I am kind of moderately interested. I wasn't before interested in Lance Mason at Missouri State, just because I tend not to really attack those new FBS teams every year. But now he's at Wisconsin. That gets a little more interesting. But I don't know like how late that is. But he's probably a guy that I'm looking at a little bit.
I mean, I don't know where any of these guys go. I imagine they're all going late. But Elijah Lofton is an interesting one to me. And then where did Tanner Kozoil transfer to Houston, right?
Yeah, it's probably not great. I mean, I don't know, not an offense that uses the tight end, and I've been pretty staunch on, like, I think he's a MAC only player. I think he's overestimated his abilities, but he's probably also getting paid more. So on that side of things, good for him. But
that is true. This is a great throwback right here by Luke. When the game first got announced it was coming back, me and Felix were all excited about it. Austin didn't even know what this game was, had never played it. And now
I knew what it was, but I'd never played it.
He can't stop playing it. Matter of fact, I hear some horror stories going on at the Nace household about how much Austin
family's falling apart. So I've sold everything in the house except for my laptop and my monitor here to pay for Ultimate Team. Yeah, it's gotten bad.
It's getting bad. Ethan Sowers asks, which player or players are you not leaving underdraft best ball drafts without this summer?
I can't do it in PA, so it's not cool. Not cool.
Yeah. Do you have any players? I've got one, maybe two, but that might be too high. I feel like he's probably going to get drafted really high, but Desmond Reed, I think, is a player I will try to leave most drafts with. I think could be.
Oh, it's like you don't even listen to the Ball with My Bestie.
God.
I don't know. It's like recently. It's not full PPR, so that, like, he's the kind of guy that probably gets drafted a little too high based on
interest.
A lot of his production.
Okay.
Coming from PPR.
There are two players.
I do listen to your show. Take that.
Oh, it was Chris who said it. I completely tuned Chris out. I only listen to Ethan.
Only listen to Ethan parts of the show.
There are two, and this may be just because, and I'll give a shout out to Chris on this actually, because me and him were both on this. If I can, I would like to leave not everyone, but most of them with Jordan Tyson and Sam Levitt. I think another big year's coming for them. Me and Chris K were very right on that early on. And I think if Sam maybe would have gotten going a little bit quicker, would have been really good for you in your underdog drafts last year. But I will be drafting both those guys a lot.
How about this? This is the only one that I really have because I can't do these drafts. But Wayman Jordan at USC is going to be a huge target for me in all drafts this offseason. I'm pretty in there.
All right, we'll get through these last couple in the chat, and then we will call it a night. So Shane asks, how do we see the split between CJ Donaldson and James Peoples? I think Peoples is going to lead the room. I know there's a lot of talk about how much they love Donaldson, but from a lot of the stuff that I've heard, the coaching staff also really loves Bo Jackson, and I think Bo Jackson will eat into Donaldson's workload a little bit more than people think. I do think Donaldson's going to be a guy who gets it in the red zone a lot, and I think there will be games where Donaldson does lead the team in carries because they're going to rest Peoples a little bit more for certain games. But I think at the end of the day, Peoples it's probably going to be closer to like a 60% work share split between Peoples and Donaldson. If I don't even know if I can say that because I think Bo Jackson will come close to, if not out carry CJ Donaldson.
Yeah, I don't think Donaldson is, from a fantasy perspective, going to be much of a factor this year. Maybe a giddy game where he has 3 1-yard touchdowns or something, but I just don't think he's that quality of a player. And that was a big battle between the Campus Life hosts and the Debbie debate, or the Back to Debbie hosts a couple years ago when he was a true freshman. He wasn't even that good as a freshman. His whole value was just in the fact that you could plug him in a tight end. I didn't think his performances were that impressive. I don't think he's that impressive as a player. I think he took a nominal pay increase to go be third string at Ohio State as opposed to being, a rotation, actually in the rotation actively at West Virginia. I pretty firmly believe that. I
mean, I short of saying I know for an absolute fact that that's true. I mean, and I'll give Mike Valerie a shout out on this too. We've both talked to people who said they literally just brought him in for depth, and I truly believe that person's not lying to me.
They
and
didn't
I imagine
have
Mike's
any
source.
So,
yeah.
They had to get somebody. Yeah, it was Peoples.
That was it.
Bo Jackson, and
they had
walk-ons.
Bo hadn't even signed technically.
Yeah.
I don't think he had officially signed. He had said he was going to Ohio State, but hadn't officially signed that he was going to Ohio State when they brought in Donaldson. So yeah, I don't see it. Luke asks, what happens to Ryan Day in a world which OSU loses to Michigan? I honestly don't think anything happens to him because he won the national championship. That'll buy him at least another couple of years. Ohio State fans won't be happy and they will probably lose their what if he loses to Michigan again. But I mean, he just won them a national championship, and he'll make the playoffs, so I don't think they'll care. They'll blame it on Julian Sain first year starting. I don't think it'll be the end of the world. Colin asks, how much do we think NIL and transfer portal will change the P4 versus G5 stigma for recruiting?
I'm not sure that we'll see a lot of changes there. I think the only real, I don't know, because I think there's going to actually be a lot of, I think if the House settlement ends up finalizing and there's basically like a $20 million bucket to choose from every single year to pay out of, I think you're actually going to see a lot of Power 4 teams not pay freshmen that heavily. So, what does that mean for everybody else? I don't know. Like, I know, for instance, and I know like this has been heavily publicly debated over the past 24 hours. Jackson Cantwell, who chose Miami, the number one recruit in the 2026 class, he chose Miami, Florida over Oregon and Georgia. And the truth, as most things are, probably falls somewhere in the middle of what Georgia fans say and what Miami fans say, because Georgia was thought to kind of be the leader there. But Georgia has a pretty strict cap on what they're willing to pay freshmen, and Miami does not. And that probably ended up being the factor. And I'm not going to discuss amounts, but I think that's probably accurate. Like, I think we'll see a lot of that kind of stuff. Obviously, it doesn't really impact, the number one overall recruit, but, a kid, a low 4-star debating between a couple of schools, be interested to see if the Power 4 teams kind of aren't super interested in paying those guys a lot of money, and then do they choose to go there anyway, or do they choose to take a step down maybe and collect a little more? That'll be an interesting dynamic to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I know Jared Palmgren, our CFF lead here, can probably back this up for the Georgia side of things. I know for a fact there's a lot of the big schools that don't pay freshmen that much to begin with anyway. And I'm talking about the top tier, like college schools, and like the ones everybody's going to. Like, everybody thinks when especially with some of the stuff that was reported last year about Ohio State's roster, but Ohio State didn't pay that many. It was Jeremiah Smith. That was the only freshman they really paid any money to. A lot of their stuff went to transfer players or to keep those players. And that's the same thing this year. Like Julian Sain, he was a transfer. He was not a freshman when they brought him in. He transferred in from Alabama. So a lot of those schools are going for the transfer. So something kind of to revert back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show with Dion. That's what he's been doing with Colorado. He'll heavy transfer portal. They do not go toward the freshmen. He's consistently said, I want guys who've already proven they can play at this level. So it will be interesting to see what happens, especially.
That's why he signs the third string running back from Alabama. That's, because he wants guys that are proven at this level.
He is technically somewhat proven. Martin asks, bad sign for the Texas incoming freshmen. Then we were talking about the wide receiver room. I mean, we've talked a lot about this, I think, on this show and definitely on the official, if you've checked that out when we were talking about the other classes. Yes, I think so. I think, you got Dalen McCutcheon. Oh God, why did I just forget both of their names now?
Jamie French and Khalil Lockett.
Khalil Lockett, Jamie French. I think one of those probably. I think we feel good about one maybe breaking a year 1-0, and it's become Khalil Lockett. But I would not be surprised if all three of them don't, just because of the way that room looks now.
Yep. Second that.
Luke asks, how many G5 teams have been able to get higher rated high school recruits since P4 takes?
He says, I know many G5 teams
gotcha.
get higher.
That wasn't a question. My bad. Colin, how many shares is too many shares of Lothair Brooks in Devy drafts?
If anyone listened to Campus, go listen to Campus Life yesterday, and I'll tell you what I think about Lothair Brooks in relation to this class. That's all I can say.
All right. Daniel says, do you think the 2026 rookie quarterback class can contend with the 2020 QB class, assuming Arch declares? What was the 2020 class? Was Zach Zach Wilson? No, was that 2020? Was that 5 years ago? Why would we talk about that class? Zach Wilson sucked. Justin Fields hasn't been good either. Trevor Lawrence hasn't been good.
It was Burrow to Herbert,
okay.
Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts.
Well, I mean,
it's too early. I'm not answering that question today. Realistically, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts,
And who else? Who are the other ones? Because Tua's not been that good.
Tua's been really good. He's just not Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow.
Herbert.
Jordan Love.
Well, Jordan Love actually has been good. Okay, so what's that? 5 quarterbacks? I'll answer the question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not answering that. I'm not answering those kind of questions today. It's not an exercise I find particularly enjoyable.
Man of the people, Matt Bruening will answer as soon as I pull up my rankings really quick so I can look at how I have these guys ranked. So I can tell you real quick. How will it compare? I would definitely take the 2020 class. If I'm looking at 2026 right now, there's like 3 guys I truly believe could be up there. That's Arch, Lenore Sellers, and Sam Levitt. I don't love anybody else in this class that way. So, I mean, what are you looking at? Dante Moore. I mean, what do we got even with the 20? Even if you talk about like Drew Allar, Cade Klubnik, if Hoover ends up being something like, I'm not putting any of those guys in any of those conversations. It's just 3. So I would take the 2020 class.
Mateer. Beck.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No.
I mean, people would have said the same thing about Jalen Hurts, though. So
that's true. But I'll make it. If Carson Beck, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make that bet. If AR-15 doesn't pan out this year, does that hurt Sellers' stock for the NFL draft? No, not at all. Sellers is a much better passer, in my opinion.
I think even if, like, let's say that they're the exact same player. Like, let's just assume that. The rest of the fact pattern is so different between Sellers and A-Rich. Sellers will have like a whole, like over a year's additional worth of games started, like a ton more experience, will have been way more productive. Like, I just think the fact patterns, I get what you're asking. Like, and I get the initial kind of, the rationale to kind of go there, but I think they're just different fact patterns. Other than the fact that they're big black mobile dudes like that. Other than that, I think they're very different fact patterns at that point.
Matt, I know you said no Spanish teacher talk, but let's be honest. Akron may need help to get that GPA up. Maybe, don't know. Tristan,
that Akron stuff is wild.
I don't know what you're talking about, so I have no
idea.
They
can't. They were probably going to anyway, but they're not eligible for bowl games because none of the players, like their academic scores were way too low over like a rolling 3 or 4 year period, which like never ever happens.
Interesting.
I don't know. I mean, I assume Akron's not Liberty in terms of quality of education, but like I don't know how you go that many years in a row without.
Look,
like what are you recruiting? What are the I don't know where Akron ranks nationally.
Akron, I'm almost positive Akron's motto is we're here to play football, not play school. So props to them.
Let's see. It's number 377 in the country in 2025's edition of Best Colleges by US News. So
out of how many
that's
schools?
like
380?
Not good, but it's not like, I don't know. With that, I would have thought they were like 500 or something.
Yeah. Tristan,
Liberty's lower. Liberty's lower.
Of course, Liberty's lower.
Except everybody.
Do they? I don't know. I don't know.
It's a paper.
I don't pay that close attention to why you hate Liberty so much. I just know that you hate them.
It's a 99% acceptance rate. It's a joke.
You know. Maybe some people just really want to go to college, Austin. I don't know what to tell you. It wouldn't be a show without me asking your thoughts on buff players for the NFL potential and for Austin to say something nice about Colorado. We did that earlier in the show.
I actually said some nice things about Deion.
We talked about Tristan, super excited for the primetime documentary.
Yeah.
Last one here. Luke says, I mean, we were worried about Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith. No, we weren't. We weren't. I know, but I want to highlight it. We were not worried about Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams. Austin said that he thought Ryan Williams was going to lead the team in receiving. No, wait. Actually, I want to clarify. There were people at this network who were worried about what Jeremiah Smith did. There was one person who said Jeremiah Smith was going to lead the team in receiving and break the records. And then also Volume Pigs did write that in an article as well, that Jeremiah Smith was going to break the receiving record. So we were not worried about that at all. So, but no, there are none of those guys in this class. Those two are very specials. But what? No, not in the 2025 class. 2026 class. I think Tristan Keys would be able to do that at LSU, but that is a story for another time. Apologies. Actually, I'm not sorry, Kirk. You've been saying some pretty outlandish stuff lately. I purposely left you back there so you could just listen to this whole show.
Poor Kirk.
Maybe Austin when he takes back over driving this show next week, we'll let you on. I am not, but that is Austin Nace. I am Matt Bruening. Good night. Good luck.